All right, second hour. What do we got? We got enzymes. Do something in the body. Okay. Important. A couple things about enzymes. First, enzymes can be turned off and on by hormones. They're very specific. You don't want an enzyme that breaks every single chain in your body. You would just fall apart. So enzymes can be turned off and on naturally by hormones. Synthetic hormones are called, not all, drugs. If you want to turn an enzyme off and on in your body, the enzyme that controls pain or something, you take a drug. So the whole basis of drug therapy is basically to turn enzymes off and on. It's mimicking what hormones do naturally. There's a lot of drug talk coming in this class. And you're ready for it. Now, some enzymes are okay working alone. Others need helpers, which are called cofactors. Why in the world would Dr. Sinsky want me to know about this stuff? It seems obscure. It's important. You deal with it every day of your life. So some enzymes are okay working alone. Others need cofactors. If the cofactor is a metal, we say that's a mineral. If it is an organic molecule, we say that's a vitamin. And there's got to be water-soluble vitamins that you can't overdose on, and fat-soluble vitamins that you can't overdose on. But if you ever wondered why, like, a cereal box has vitamins and minerals, at one point, to help with malnutrition, they found ways of sticking stuff into food. And they said all cereals will have vitamins and minerals in them to make sure that we get everything. So they're just cofactors that make enzymes work. Now, something I like to talk about at that point is if a metal was toxic, you don't get to live and breed. But the reason I mentioned that, if a metal was toxic, you don't get to live and breed. I don't know how you feel about evolution. I'm not going to like make a statement about evolution, etc. But often the minerals we need and proportions naturally match what is in the ocean. The percent of selenium or something that you need might be the same percent that's in the ocean. What's that about? Well, a lot of times you hear these, the History Channel is a horrible channel these days. There's very little on there that's history. And sometimes they make stuff up where they do ancient aliens and stuff. We clearly came from this planet. I mean, in my opinion, if you share so much DNA with a banana, it's not even funny. And also, you just happen to need what's in the ocean almost at its percentages. Why would this be? If we did evolve, and I'm not saying we evolved, okay, but if we did evolve from something from our oceans, if you had 10 of the little creatures trying to live, and 9 of them died from selenium, but one of them was like, I found a reason to use it, which means an enzyme grabbed it, trying to get it out of the way of killing us, okay? So if that little creature gets to use selenium, that little creature gets to breed and have more children, or whatever you want to call little creatures, babies or offspring, okay? So that little creature gets to continue living, but God forbid that creature was no longer on this planet where he would get his selenium, he would die, because if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Well, in this case, whatever was in the ocean seems to be what we need. This whole thing about going to other planets, boy, we're going to miss our planet because our planet has particular environmental factors that we've figured out how to live with. Like I said, if you have water, water makes iron disappear as rust. It's extremely toxic, but because we're based on water, we love the stuff. Come from another planet without water, it'd be pretty rough. Okay, so there's your vitamin and mineral talk to go along with your enzymes. Now we got to talk more about fats. So what do we got done here? We got enzymes done. And what are their chemical structure? Most of the time they're proteins, no reason to call about that. Carbohydrates are pretty much done. Calories are done. We're going to deal with these in health chapter. Lipids and proteins, I want to hit lipids. What is a lipid? Well, carbohydrate is a polyhydroxyaldehyde or ketone, right? If I say in an exam, what's a carbohydrate in one sentence, and you're like, let me look, oh my God, the things people do. If I say to name this CH3O, there's a cyclohexane. I said, name it my way, methyl cyclohexyl ether. What am I seeing on exams? Methoxycyclohexane. I'm like, did you really have to? I even hand wrote it. Did you have to look that thing up online? It's so much easier just to do it from this class. You don't want to just be hunters your entire life looking through Google for stuff. Let's leave that alone. But I was like, really? You couldn't look at the lecture, huh? Just name both sides. Or maybe I have a bad lecture. Maybe it's like really, but a lot of people mastered it. They did okay on that page. Getting past that, lipids. Well, what is a lipid? If you grind up plant or animal material, whatever dissolves in a nonpolar solvent is a lipid. Now, I don't like saying nonpolar solvents. People don't have an idea about that. Oil and water. Oil is nonpolar. It's organic. Water is aqueous. It's polar. Okay? If things have oxygens, they dissolve in water. Carbohydrates have a lot of oxygens. They dissolve in water. If I'm using glucose as my discussion, as always, if I stick this in water, water will use capillary action and wick up the paper because he likes it. Okay? So, getting past that nonpolar solvent, I used to say gasoline because I always thought this is the only nonpolar solvent that non-major knows, but I could just say hexane. Octane, hexane, heptane, any nonpolar solvent, if you grind up some plant or animal material, which we do a whole lot in the lab, you'd be surprised. But if you grind up some plant or animal material and you're trying to find something inside of it, whatever dissolves is a lipid. So any biological molecule that dissolves in a nonpolar solvent is a lipid. It's a catch-all phrase. So lipids don't actually have to look like each other, they just have to be nonpolar. Proteins and carbohydrates have some O's and some N's on them, so they're going to dissolve in water, believe it or not. Okay, so types of lipids, classes of lipids. Well, First of all, let's talk about a long chain of carbons. You don't have to write as many carbons as I have. Yay! It's long enough. If it was one, it would be methane gas, 2 ethane gas, 3 propane gas, 4 butane gas, 5 pentane, maybe a little bit of a liquid, but very volatile. Hexane, heptane, octane, nonane, decane. Oh my God, it's almost a plastic. But a really long chain, this would be like a wax. Okay, so this would be like paraffin wax. They're used for candles. The cheap candles that have no smell, just straight chains of carbons. And if you notice, they last a really long time inside these drawers, so like emergency candles, okay? Well, then there's beeswax. So there are lipids that natural waxes. So there's natural waxes. And what can I say about our natural waxes? I'll make sure I say all the same things to you guys. Okay. A natural wax, like let's say you had beeswax. BEES wax candle. First of all, you'll notice they look like they're falling apart. They're not as stable as like one of those emergency candles. Why? Because they got long chains of carbons, but inside the center, if you were in my class, I would say, what functional group is that? And you'd say, R-cetibavondo, OR, that's an ester. These things can break at the esters. So the beeswax candles, anything made with that kind of wax is going to be just as waxy feeling, but they're not as stable. Just like we've had plastics that can be broken up, a way of getting rid of plastics. Well, getting past that, you could have this wax and it could break at this particular point. That would be a wax. There are other waxes, though, in nature. You'd be surprised how much you use them. Like there's duck wax. That's an amazing creature. You can't sink a duck, okay? If you know, I don't know why, but people don't really like duck eggs, but if you go to a store and buy a duck egg, it's a larger egg. It has a different taste, a much darker yolk, but the outside is waxy as can be. If you go to an Oriental restaurant, okay, I don't want to say Chinese restaurant but there are other ones, I guess, but a Chinese restaurant will have duck in there more often than not. They have one of their duck meals. If you look at a duck versus a chicken, a duck is a really fatty animal. I'm like, oh my God. Well, that's because it has so much wax on it. Okay, so it's a duck wax. It's on its egg, it's on its fur. Well, not fur, on its feathers. It's pretty amazing. Sheep wax. Lanolin. There's only so many chemicals in your house. You'd be surprised how many of your lotions contain lanolin. Okay, so a lot of times if they say it has collagens and elastomers and things like that, it's part of an animal we want you to rub into your skin so you don't get wrinkles, and I'm not sure any of that works. We're saying it works for the animal, elastomers, let me rub it into my skin. It may not even work, who knows. But sheep wax, if you ever like handle the sheep, if you have to shear a sheep, I had sheep as a kid, okay, back in the 1970s, and you have to shear them because they get really, really like woolly dogs, okay? But if you don't shear the sheep, it's pretty amazing when you finally do. That is some waxy stuff. And every time in the laboratory when I actually make a lotion with sheep wax, I give them so many different perfumes to put on top of it. They never get rid of the sheep smell. And they're like, this is horrible stuff. I don't know how they get rid of the sheep smell because some of these things are waxes. Okay, so that's a lipid. This whole thing would not dissolve in water. That's one of the lipids. The wax is a category of lipid. So let's write that down somewhere for you. Lipids. Wax. Can break down a little bit with water, but not much if it's got esters. It's got that ester thing, that's why the beeswax is not that stable. has a little bit of effect with water, but most of the time it's going to be completely, not really mixed with water. Next, there would be fats. Now, the actual fat molecule I'm going to draw in a minute, but long chain. At the end, that's a carboxylic acid. If we ever get back to in classes, people will shout it back to me, but we can tell you right now for a fact that's a long chain carboxylic acid. But it's a long chain fatty acid. If you're wondering. If I were to put a sodium on here, I could make the salt of a long chain fatty acid, which would be a soap. We'll talk about soaps, okay? Not in the soap chapter yet. But that's but you need to build the molecules first. That's a long chain fatty acid. So here's the question to you. Why do you feel full after eating? Why does a person feel full after eating? Students often say, well, there's only so much room in my stomach, I feel pressure. If you remember my discussion about like a pregnant woman knows everything she's ever eaten before, and if she's trying to build a brain stem for a baby that day, she might be like, oh my God, I've got to have pickles, or I've got to have anchovies and pickles together with ice cream on the side. And you give her what she wants because you want the baby to be born healthy, and also because it's nice to give the woman what she wants. But what do you feel? Why do you feel full after eating? Your body has scanned all of its particular foods, so it's this chemical process that instantly says full or not full. It's really strange. In the brain, your hypothalamus triggers with long chain fatty acids. In the brain, the hypothalamus will trigger with long chain fatty acids in the bloodstream. So for example, what is rice? Starch, which is nothing but glucose. In parts of Asia, they can have a higher calorie intake, but they're thinner because they're just eating glucose and they don't have any real fats in there. But getting past that, one of the oldest expressions from America is, to make a long story short, if you eat Chinese food, you're going to be hungry a half hour later or something weird like that, because you have so much glucose inside of you from the starch, but you really don't have any long-chain fatty acids. It's a trick to your brain. When you have long-chain fatty acids floating around in your bloodstream, your hypothalamus says, tell the person he's full. Even if you're not full, it's going to say that. So if you eat a bunch of rice, you'll probably still be hungry. If you eat one of those older McDonald's hamburgers that aren't really good for you, it throws long-chain fatty acids into your bloodstream so quickly, in my opinion, that you're like, oh my God, I'm totally full, okay? It's a trick of your brain. It doesn't mean you're full, it doesn't mean you're not full. It's just that there must be some particular switch in your brain to tell you if you're full or not full, and I guess your body evolutionary, if it is evolutionary, picked this bizarre switch. It's a nice switch to have, because if you have too many long-chain fatty acids, you have hardening of the arteries, you get heart attacks, and all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to not have too many long-chain fatty acids. But anyway, where do we get long-chain fatty acids from? We get them from fats. All right. Now, to remind you, C double bond O with 2 hydrogens is just ethylene. If I added a bucket of hydrogens, I could break the second part of the double bond to make a single bond, put a new pair of hydrogens on there and make ethane. This would be saturated with hydrogens, and this is unsaturated. Saturated with hydrogens, unsaturated. If this particular long chain fatty acid had a double bond, wherever the double bond is, it's going to change the direction. This should be an unsaturated long chain fatty acid. So I want to show you where these fats come from. So let me erase this. I'll erase this over here first. Okay. All right, let's draw one of these little fellas. Good. The backbone. CH2. In fact, I'll do it this way. Give myself some room. Let me erase this. Try to get all of this done in one way. CH2, CH, CH2, C double bond, or better yet, I'll do it this way. I'll make sure I do this right. So I'll say O, C double bond O, and let me go up and down. Now this could be a much longer chain. O, C double bond O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There we go. O, C double bond O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yes. I hope you could see that if you were to break this and put an H here, that is a long chain fatty acid. That would be a carboxylic acid. But let's not break it yet. Together, this is an ester. I was seeing things like acetaldehyde and stuff in the test. I was like, really? What do you, oh, you must have friends who know chemistry or something. Because I was like, why would you be picking these words? It's so much easier to name it from this class. Unless you don't like to listen. All right. So anyway, getting past that, this has 3 long chain fatty acids that have no double bond. So this would be a saturated fat. This is the one that's uncommon in nature. You can store and burn with exercise. You can store it and you can burn it with exercise, but you can't break it down and use it for anything else. Like if you go on a low carbohydrate diet, your brain needs carbohydrates. If your brain absolutely positively had no carbohydrates, it would break up your skeletal muscle. It would break the protein chains down because to your body, fats are sacred. Saturated fats are sacred. What are they good for? Protection. And that's for like falling down, okay? I mean, when especially for women with bone issues for calcium, when they get older, I can't tell you how many break their arms in their 60s when they fall down off of a stairwell or something like that. Just be really careful the older you get because you never seem to get range of motion back completely. They think they're like riding their bike, having a good life, they're still feeling great at 62, 63, but they may not have enough protection, okay? So protection, you need that, and also to keep warm. As hunter-gatherers, if we at least evolved from hunter-gatherers, we were not top of the food chain. We did not get very many good meals all the time. So you needed to have fat to keep warm outside, and you needed to make sure that you could fall down and be thrown off a cliff a little bit and not get too hurt. So fats are important for protection and for keeping warm, long chain fats. And I did a bit of this before. Now, that's a saturated fat. It's got different names, but triglyceride might be called triacyl. Used to be called an acyl group, acylglyceride, or it could be called just glyceride. Either way, you worry about your fats, triglycerides, certain types of fats. This would be a saturated fat. This is the one that you worry about, because this thing, it could cause some hardening of the arteries, etc. We'll talk about arteriosclerosis if I even say the word. But here's a long chain saturated fat. So this would be like your lard or bacon grease. Your bacon grease or something. Or let's say you have a very fatty chicken. If you boil a natural chicken to make chicken soup, okay? I had a wood stove. I had no hot water. Oh my God, you have no idea how long I've been alive. So I grew up in a chicken coop, believe it or not, with 9 children in this chicken coop. My dad was completely illiterate. But getting past that, if you boil a natural chicken and make some chicken soup out of it, like FDR wanted to have a chicken in every pot, when you put the chicken soup in the icebox, we said icebox back then, I stopped saying it, but now I'm saying it again. If you put it inside the icebox the next day, you wouldn't see a layer of fat that much on top. You take today's meat bird that has never been let out of its cage and just murdered the way they do, and it's as fatty as can be, and the chicken is so soft and easy. It's all like center breast keel stuff, okay? When you take today's meat bird and you make a soup out of that, wow. That thing gives you a layer of fat, and it's saturated fat this much. It's because they blow the bird up to get more pounds per weight out of it. Okay, it's part of this farming industry that's pretty wild out there. So obviously, these are solids, and they're solids because they stack tightly. Because these go inside of each other. That's what I was trying to get to. They stack very tightly. Now I'm going to make this unsaturated. Now, by the way, once you put a double bond, your body can break it with acid. We talked about that, but it doesn't hurt you to hear it again. So let's make one of these chains unsaturated. Let's say I put a double bond here. All of a sudden, this one goes in this direction, this one goes in this direction, and it's going to do all cut. Well, it's not like a triangle here. This one could go, I'll make a double bond here. Let's make it go like that. It can't stack up very nicely. So if all 3 of these chains are unsaturated, I guess I'll just unsaturate the heck out of these little fellas. So double bond, make it go down, double bond, make it go this way, double bond here, make it go that way, and then I'll go double bond. I'm just trying to make a mess on purpose, okay? But I'm trying to say, look, it didn't stack. How do you know that this triglyceride is unsaturated? Now, because of this lecture right now, you're going to say, well, it's got double bonds, but how do you know your food? Sunflower oil. You look at Crisco or lard, and you look at sunflower oil. Which one do you think is unsaturated? If it can't stack, it can't make a solid. It looks healthier because of that. Doesn't taste as good. Why doesn't it taste as good? Because, back to that evolution thing, if I eat this, and this is common in nature, if I eat a triglyceride that is unsaturated, the minute it gets to the acid in my stomach, all these break and I can't store it. My body's like, but I wanted to store it for fat because we're not going to have any fat. We're not going to have any protection. We got to run around outside. We're going to freeze to death. The animals will get to us and stuff like that. because our bodies don't know that there's Kroger's, okay? So this is made not to taste as good. Your body, just like the hypothalamus trick to figure out if you're full, et cetera, all the other things your body does to keep you moving around all day long, your body goes out of its way to say, let's try to find the fats that are more saturated so that we can store them. But in you, for cooking, the light oils you could tell are unsaturated. They're more healthy for you. People should know they're cooking. I was making fun of, I suppose, the History Channel, but I always say this, of all of the reality shows, and they're all bad for you pretty much, the only one that's good that has helped mankind is the cooking shows, because I can't tell you how much better people are as cooks. People are able to like judge restaurants better, so everybody's better at being a cook these days. All right, let's say I have this molecule. So far, it's got two of the tails on it. This is the nonpolar tail. And you'd be like, well, he's clearly drawing a saturated fat. But if one of these guys, I do this, O, P, O, 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 line, line, line. This is a phosphate. It's the phosphate head. A triglyceride that isn't a triglyceride has two of the triglyceride chains, but then it's got a phosphate head. This is polar. Anything with oxygen is polar. That side sticks to water. This is often drawn this way. The head and then the tail. So this would be the phosphate and the two tails. This would be the phosphate and the two tails. And then they show another one like this. Get that going. Line O. This is the lipid bilayer of cells. And this becomes a phospholipid. So what types of lipids are there so far? There's the natural waxes, there's the fats, which are the triglycerides, then 3 of the phospholipids. Getting somewhere now. If you ever wonder how your body actually functions being nonpolar but having so much water, etc., your bloodstream would be out here. Your bloodstream is out here. Things need to be fed into the cell. They have to find ways through the lipid bilayer. We're always trying to get drugs through particular things into the cells. Like if you're doing something with diabetes, if you don't have insulin, then the glucose cannot be taken into your cell, and that's where this huge problem comes from, etc. If you want to get a drug that works on the brain, you have to get through the blood-brain barrier. There are a lot of drugs that don't go through the blood-brain barrier, etc. So that would be your phospholipid. Why is it a lipid? Because these chains are long enough that the whole thing is insoluble in water. Even though it's got this side here that's soluble in water, most of it's insoluble in water. If you grind up plant or animal material, your waxes are going to dissolve in the gasoline, and your triglycerides are going to dissolve in the gasoline, and your phospholipids will dissolve in the gasoline. So that's your third lipid as we work our way through lipids. I'm going to give you one more lipid, but I want to say something else first. Now that we've mentioned so much about lipids, you want to lose weight, but you don't exercise. And there's no way to lose weight unless you don't exercise, unless you fast. And then that's going to cannibalize your skeletal muscle. But let's say you buy this magic bottle of lipase I keep seeing on TV. And you're like, well, you know, I've had a little bit of a liberal arts education. I didn't just want a degree where I learned some tech thing. I wanted to learn some religion. I went to Bellarmine. So make a long story short, ACE means it's an enzyme that works on a lipid. That's great. What is this stuff? It's mostly speed. And the speed is inside of there. And then they have some other chemicals that really are probably not doing half of the work they say they're doing. It's mostly some kind of caffeinated thing. Why is that interesting? Why does speed, don't take a lot of speed, speed work to lose weight? Well, let's say you were starving and you're ready to eat, you don't have any particular health issues where you can't eat, and your favorite sandwich that you always wanted is being put in front of you. So you have this mental little experiment in your head right here, and you're like, oh my God, I really want to eat this. This is the best thing in the world. And then sadly, someone comes in the house and starts like murdering a family member in front of you. At that point, this would be a horrible thing, okay? At that point, if you have a soul, or if you care, if you have a conscience, is what I was trying to say, you're gonna say, hey, you know, I'm just not hungry. I wanna stop that person from murdering my family member. So, speed triggers the fight or flight response. So if you take a lot of speed, you think you're always like having to react to an emergency and you're not hungry. That's like one of those tricks. It triggers the fight and flight response. Now, it's pretty scary if you're like somebody who's, I don't know, some sort of a sociopath or something who can just be like, I'm still gonna eat this sandwich first. I hope that's not true, okay? But that's the only reason the speed thing works. You're so hyped up that you're nervous and you're like, I just don't wanna eat anything. You just need to live a good life and like have a regular diet. And to maintain a decent weight after you're like 25, you just have to always be hungry the rest of your life. Because the older you get, like if I look online for how many calories I can eat, if I type in 25, I can eat 8 million calories. If I type in I'm 70, I can have 7 on a good day. That's not true, but that's what it seems like. You're like, well, that's not fair. The older you get, the more you have to like just be careful what you eat. All right, so getting past that, the last lipid. What was a lipid? A lipid is something, then I won't do anything after the last lipid, oh my God. The last lipid, a lipid is something that if you dissolve animal or plant material in gasoline or hexane, it's gonna dissolve in there and it's not gonna dissolve in the water. The phospholipids, the waxes, and the triglycerides are in there. This next one, look at this molecule. I'm gonna want you to know the shape of this molecule. The backbone. Here we go. It's not a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. There are no benzenes here. Good. This guy. There has to be a ring here to be a benzene. It's not aromatic, okay? This is the backbone of a steroid. Miracle drug. Oh my God, we need steroids in this planet. But if you, when you need steroids, like if you have an emergency situation where you have to stop swelling internally, taking prednisolone, they'll give you a high dose and less every day. 100 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 25 milligrams, well, that's actually quite high. But whatever they give you, they'll probably give you 75 for 3 days, 50 for 3 days, 25 for 3 days, and you have to work your way off of it. But it's amazing. This is the backbone. If you put like some CH3s on here or different things, you get different molecules. Some vitamins are steroids, etc. Why do I even mention steroids, aside from the fact that in long-term taking them, they're bad for you, but in small amounts when you need them, they're amazing drugs. Why do I even mention this? Because I'm doing lipids, and it's one of the classes of lipids. It dissolves in nonpolar solvents. So with that, that's the end of the second lecture, and that's it for me. I'm going to stop this lecture right now. Thanks for paying attention. Where is the stop button?